Welcome to Connecting the Dots, a non-traditional legal program with your host and trusted advisor, Liz Myska, your guide through the web of life's dilemmas.
Welcome to another edition of Connecting the Dots. I'm your host, Liz Myska. And today I have the distinct pleasure of having Victor Perez from the city of Worcester, also a fellow attorney, join me. Welcome, Vic.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here with you.
You literally wear a number of hats. But I'm going to reel you in. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start from when you were youngin'? And looking out on the career and saying, I want to be a lawyer.
I came out this way. I went to Boston College. And I like to say this all the time. I fell in love with New England, and I fell in love with my wife. Both really good reasons to stick around. So that's what I ended up doing. After I finished at BC, I started my post-college life as a Peace Corps volunteer. So I served in the Peace Corps for a little over 2 years in Mozambique. Which is in southern Africa. Folks will ask me, because maybe they've heard of it, but they can't necessarily point it out on the map. Right. So I'll just say it's...
I'm one of those people.
There you go. There you go. I had to do the same, too, when I first heard where I was being assigned. But it's right next to South Africa.
Okay.
So pretty much as south down the continent as you can go. I'm
just going to ask you, did you know what you were going to be doing? Did you have an idea of what you were going to be doing? Or you were just like, deploy me however you want?
Yeah. I knew that I wanted to do international service work. So as it came time in the early part of senior year, the late part of junior year to begin applying, I really thought a lot about that. There was a couple programs I applied to, including Jesuit Volunteer International. With the Peace Corps, there was a lot less, at the time, there was a lot less choice in the sort of work that you could do, and also the location where you would be actually serving out your time. When you sign up, you can identify your preference if you want to be a teacher, if you want to be focused on health and hygiene issues. You can talk if you're interested in more community development. If you have some folks sign up for the Peace Corps, not just straight out of college, they have a bit of background and a lot of experience in different areas, so they might be doing more specialized projects, maybe agriculturally focused, something that requires a wide breadth of experience. So,
did you have a preference?
For me, I mean, I think I was really interested in serving. I think that was true for a lot of people in college. I'm young, idealistic. I want to change the world. I don't know what changing the world looks like. Okay. But I know that I want to help make a difference in the lives of others. Just what does that look like? So I went into that. That was sort of my attitude going into the application process of, I want to be able to serve and do good and be helpful with whatever skills a young 21-year-old kid with a theology degree and a history minor,
okay.
Right?
Wow,
not exactly applicable necessarily, right? To the work that's being done.
We're going to become a missionary.
Not even, right? Yeah. So it was pretty wide open, and they sort of take it from there and just would place you where they need you and where it fits.
Wow.
So that's how I ended up in Mozambique.
So what was your take?
Yeah.
Did it meet expectations? Did it exceed expectations? Were you what was your impression?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it both met and exceeded expectations. And really it came from I did a bit of traveling when I was in college. I went to Europe for a stint growing up. On my dad's side, I'm Venezuelan. I was in South America for a bit. I did some trips. I was in El Salvador. I've been to different places and experienced different cultures. So I had a sense that I would very much be outside my comfort zone. I don't think one could really ever appreciate or fully understand just how much you actually are outside your comfort zone until you really experience that phenomenon of you get training, but it's a 3-month training, and you're supposed to learn a basic amount of language skills in that time. So I learned Portuguese. And then you go to site, you're assigned to work with either a nonprofit or a school. At least this was true for the Mozambique program at the time. And that's it. You live on your own, but you live in a larger community. So I think the thing that was both surprising and not surprising at the same time was how difficult it would be. Being in a place away from family, away from just the familiarity of things like just the food that I would take for granted. I was talking before we started the show about my love for Reese's peanut butter cups. No such thing out there. No, unfortunately, I did not have any access to Reese's peanut butter cups while I was out in Mozambique.
Wow.
But
talking about adjustment too,
Yeah.
adjustment to a different culture that, is it fair to say, is not as technologically advanced as
Yeah, no. So, I mean, certainly at the time, particularly where I was assigned, so I was assigned in the city called Mashish, which is right on the Indian Ocean. It is a city, but it's not a city in the sense of, you think Boston, you think Worcester, you think, Buffalo. It's more like maybe like a smaller town. Nothing exceeds the height of 2 or 3 levels. Every building is pretty small. All the roads, there's one major paved, at least was at the time, one major paved road, and then the area around the city hall, there was a couple of paved roads, but most of it was just sand. Connection to telephone, although everyone didn't have phones in their homes. A lot of folks, maybe most folks that I knew, had cell phones. Connection to internet was something that not everyone had. I know that if I wanted to go talk to my now wife, then girlfriend, I would have to go to the center of town and go into a place and connect to a place that has internet, an internet cafe, in order to do that. So so it was very different in a lot of respects.
And what type of work did you do?
Yeah, so ultimately I was partnered with this this non-governmental organization called International Relief and Development. They are, it is what it sounds like. They are international. They're all over the place. They're in a lot of different countries. They do different kinds of development work. The project they were working on in Mozambique, specifically they partnered with local level nonprofits that were caring for folks with HIV and AIDS, helping to connect them with resources, helping to provide families on the ground who were living with folks with HIV and AIDS, giving them basic information of care and helping to give them supplies in order to care for their loved ones. A lot of the work that I did was around I was part of their training department. So a lot of it was capacity building trainings with these partner organizations, from everything from health and hygiene to basic accounting and financial management. So there was a wide array of things. And there was a couple other projects that I did on the side as well that were sort of tied to that larger mission. But I think the one that I was most proud of by the time I completed my service in Mozambique was called, so it's Future Business Leaders of Mozambique. And so the nature of this program, which I ran in my last year as a volunteer, it utilized grant funding from American sources. And the nature of the program, we set up classes for participating students, which came from a mixture of schools or nonprofits who were trying to get their business off the ground. And so over the course of this multi-month course, we would go through some of the basic business practices. How do you maintain a budget? Some of the basics of marketing, a real sort of crash course, so to speak. And at the end, we'd have students who had gone through this course. They would have presented any ideas they had for a business. And ultimately, these different groups would compete against each other, and the group at sort of the higher level that had the most well-formed project would get some seed money to help start their business. So while I was there, I remember one group, they pitched and successfully opened and created a pizza restaurant, which I talked about missing home and being away from home. I mean, going to a pizza place for an American Peace Corps volunteer, I mean, it's like gold, right? It's like
even without the Reese's peanut butter cups, right?
Even without it, although I will eat those two separately, I don't mind telling you. But pizza is like gold currency, right, to the Peace Corps volunteers. So we were all too happy to go and support their
I was going to say to support that, yes.
Yeah, and there's a pretty large expat community in different cities throughout the country of Mozambique. So there was no shortage of people who were interested, tourists coming by, very curious Mozambicans, who wanted to get more of a sense of what is this?
Right, and sample it.
Right, yeah,
Wow.
exactly. So,
wow. So did that galvanize you, that experience galvanize you for law school, or were you already thinking about becoming a lawyer, or?
Yeah. Yes and no. So while serving as a Peace Corps volunteer, I mean, there's a lot of spare time. Making that comment in the presence of other Peace Corps volunteers is going to evoke a chuckle, because we all appreciate and know that what I just said is an understatement, right? We have our 9-to-5 job, then we go home, and there's the weekend. None of us have TVs, right? At the time, we had our phones, but they weren't touchscreen, right? Limited access to the internet, and so we read a lot. I read a lot. I became incredibly fascinated with John F. Kennedy because, I mean, he is the reason for the creation of the Peace Corps.
I was going to say, because of the Peace Corps.
Back in 1961. So it's just one of those things of, where do I start? I'm really interested in a couple of subject areas. Where do I start? So I read about, JFK, which then led me to read a lot about Bobby Kennedy, and, specifically reading about Bobby's story was really inspiring. Someone who was Catholic like me, right? And for me now, like a lawyer like me, I identify a lot with him and in his later years. Sort of this communicated vision of social justice for everyone, and this very specific message of not just raising all boats, but specifically directing this message of social justice to the benefit of the poor and the voiceless and the people who need it the most. And so, it was in that spirit I was just sort of inspired to at least look into the possibility. Is this something that I would want to do, knowing that I wouldn't want to be litigating, I wouldn't necessarily want to be in the courtroom, per se, but even being someone else's voice or helping someone understand this is what your right is. When we're talking about policymakers, so much of the focus when we talk about fixing things is on, all right, well, what bill are we going to pass? What legislation are we going to pass? And perhaps oftentimes lost in the conversation is, well, what exists already? What do we have that people don't know about? That if they knew about it, it would just make their lives just a little bit better, just a little bit better. So I found that, inspiring, and that led me to apply, and ultimately I went to law school at Northeastern.
And what did you do for co-op?
I did a couple of things for co-op. I'll mention, because the co-op program, you get the opportunity to essentially intern, right? Co-op is a fancy word for intern. You get to intern with 4 different legal entities, right? So I won't go through all of them. I'll just give you my favorites, right?
Okay,
So I was with the Greater Boston Legal Services Immigration Unit. That was my first one. For a minute, I really thought, and I really was interested, I really wanted to get into immigration law. And when I was there, I did a lot of work on asylum cases. But if I'm being honest, I mean, that was probably one of my happiest professional experiences. Not happy because it was easy.
But you were helping people. You were putting to work
tangibly. Sitting down with clients who, unfortunately, given their experiences, fleeing their country, living under persecution, oftentimes folks suffering from PTSD, and being unable to sit down and really focus and talk about what their experiences are, trying to help them work through that, because of course they have to go before the immigration judge or the asylum officer, and they have to tell their story, which can be so hard, for so many clients. So,
and I'm sure fearful that it's not going to be persuasive enough, and they're going to be sent right back.
Deathly afraid of being sent back to, frankly, the horrors that a lot of my clients experienced. So, so that was one wonderful experience. I absolutely loved that. Another one. So there's this nonprofit in Boston called Justice at Work, and so this is an entity. At the time, it was very small. It was just the executive director. It's now since blossomed, and they have teams, and they're just really expanding and doing good, just wonderful work. But Tom Smith over at Justice at Work, he would partner with different groups that were focused on providing immigrants with information about their rights as employees, sort of like a holistic, like this is your community, but also we're here to support each other and tell you what you can do when you get in a sticky situation. So I worked a lot with the now called Brazilian Worker Center in Alston. And as part of that, and where I would often come in, they had a special program, probably still do, where they would represent some of these workers who came forward and had wage violation claims. We would take these claims to small claims court, and a lot of times when you go to small claims court, I mean, the hardest part of your job is really essentially teaching the judge like what the law is around minimum wage law violations, and the sums were sufficiently small that we were able to be in that venue, and thankfully so, because as I said, I mean, it's sufficiently small. What other lawyer is going to take up a case like that? That's not really worth a lot of money.
Right, and so often litigants are not represented, because small claims is quote unquote the people's court.
Right.
But oftentimes, the employer or the credit card company have lawyers,
Right.
and
No, exactly.
you are at the mercy if you do not have legal advice.
Exactly. And maybe it doesn't feel like such a big deal to some of these employers, but to these employees, I mean, not getting paid $1,000, $1,500, even $600, $200, like that makes so much a difference, right? That was really great work. I loved the clients I worked with. I loved working with Tom, really great guy, really passionate, really on fire. So that's in a nutshell, my internships in law school.
So now you graduate, you pass the bar.
Yep.
And when do you come to Worcester?
To make a long story short, too late, right? To make a long story short. So I ended up, after I graduated from law school, I ended up at the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. So that is the agency that enforces state civil rights laws, also partners with the federal government to enforce the federal counterparts of those same state discrimination laws, anti-discrimination laws, I should say. I did that for about 6 years. I served on the investigations team. Back in 2019, I was looking to move over here to Worcester for family reasons, to take care of a sick